Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, May 2nd. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. Eno looking more rested than usual for a Monday. And are you caffeinated? You don't drink coffee. What did you do? Did you drink some of that mud water stuff that's been going around?
No, it's just a good weekend. Took the kids to the San Jose Giants, and they did the bouncy houses and the throwing of the balls, and they were actually, I wasn't sure. Like, one of the things I told them was it might be a little bit more fun than the Stanford games we go to because they do more things like in between innings. They have more like sort of game type things, and then I was worried that they weren't going to do fun ones that day because they do different ones all the time. And they did hilarious ones because I think they're mostly hilarious, and the kids loved it. Like, one of them was a non-alcoholic run and beer chug, and it was amazing because there was two dudes and a lady, and the lady got to the table last, and there was a guy who got there first. She opened it and chugged it and beat them both, and then flipped the table and like it was like, "Wah!" And the whole crowd was like, "Yay!" So that was pretty sweet, and it's a fun overall experience because they think about what it is to take your family to a game. So cheaper tickets, $30-$40 tickets. I mean, people might say that's more than they expect, but I think you get what you pay. Like, it's good. Like, there are bouncy houses, and there's like the games, like carnival type games, and the beer is pretty decent, and the tacos were good. So there's some barbecue, but I was making ribs that night, so I was just gonna double up on the barbecue that day. But it was a good day, good weekend. Had to take them to see Sonic 2, which sometimes you do things for your kids.
I think that's part of parenting. You sometimes you sit through movies that you don't want to watch, or you rewatch things that you've seen 20 times already. I think that's when they're real little. That's the thing I gather from my brother with his kids.
Try not to let them see me checking the box scores on my phone while during the movie.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's a quiet thing to do. You're not disrupting someone else's.
You're also
enjoyment
like
of
the
movie,
only people in there, so
yeah, you're okay then.
Yeah, but yeah, good weekend. They got some Magic the Gathering cards, and were screaming at me about what elementals or this or that they got in their pack, and so I think the kids had a really good time. We did some, and you know what? One thing that's cool is they're getting back into throwing and hitting.
Nice.
So a lot more catch, and I love catch.
Yeah.
Are you awesome. A throw catch or play catch guy?
I'm a play catch guy.
I'm a play catch guy.
People say throw catch.
Have a catch.
Have a catch is, it's kind of an old expression, like designed for that specific purpose. But play catch is just the way people speak English generally when talking about that activity.
Yeah. But I am not the foremost expert on the speaking of the English.
That's okay. We enjoy learning more about your process, and it's as long as we're having fun while we're doing it. I think that's all that matters. We had a couple brats. We had some beers over the weekend.
That's right. You came over. That was good.
Yeah. We had a little chance to talk about some of the stuff that actually made it onto the rundown. I think some of the model versus the results stuff actually came up because deception is a thing that might not be fully captured by things we're looking at. But we're going to talk about hitters today that have struggled through the first month and one day of the season, because we get a lot of questions that are basically, what's wrong with this guy and what's wrong with this other guy? So we've compiled a list of some of the biggest underperforming hitters. We're going to run through and see if there's anything that's alarming for the long term, how much the expectations might have changed in some of these cases. We'll talk about some of the fallout from rosters shrinking down. So a lot of players getting moved. Robinson Cano was DFA'd, Josh Lowe was optioned, Willie Calhoun was optioned, and now he wants to be traded, which I think I can understand, given his trajectory in Texas, and a few other questions to get to over the course of the episode as well. So we'll go through this in a similar light with pitchers, probably on the Thursday episode. So if you're saying, oh, we want you to talk about pitchers that are broken, we'll get to them. We're going to keep it hitters and pitchers separate. I want to start with Marcus Semien, because I think of all the players I was looking at, he might be the earliest player ADP wise that people are truly worried about. And something you said on the show probably 2 or 3 years ago. It might have been the first year we were doing the show. Is you said you looked at O-swing percentages for hitters on new teams with big contracts, and you saw pretty consistently, right? There's an increase. There's an aggressiveness that happens, at least initially, with those players. And it makes sense from a basic psychology perspective, right? You sign this massive contract, you go to a new team, and you just want to prove, I deserve this. I earned this. I can be that player. I can be the 7-year, $175 million player that you think I am. And I think that definitely is happening right now with Marcus Semien. When you look at his O-swing percentage at 33.6%, it's easily the highest it's ever been since he became a full-time player. It's up about 8 percentage points over last year. And there's something off in the underlying numbers with how hard he's hitting the ball when he makes contact. The former doesn't worry me too much. The O-swing percentage being up is not as much of a concern as the significant drop in the quality of the contact when he makes contact. Strikeout and walk rates are about where they've been. So how concerned would you be about Marcus Semien if you either had him on your roster already or if you were thinking about possibly trying to make some kind of buy low trade to get him?
Yeah, the term that I came up with was pressing, and I think that's describing what he's doing right now. And not only people with big new contracts on new teams, but people who are traded at the deadline. So I found that was kind of maybe a useful thing for teams, like to think about the fact that we're going to trade for this guy. We want him to have really good natural play discipline. If he's going to be worse, almost by at least not by definition, but as a group, whoever we trade for at the trade deadline is going to be worse at play discipline for whatever reason, for pressing, for maybe, seeing new pitchers he hadn't seen all year, that sort of deal. But it was Chris Davis and who was the Jay Bruce. Chris Davis and Jay Bruce were kind of my way in. They both really pressed. Chris Davis really pressed when he came to Oakland, and Jay Bruce, who has a pretty good eye, pressed when he was traded to the Mets, I believe. But I see the same thing with Semien, and I do think that they're kind of related. If you're reaching at pitches outside the zone and you're making contact with those instead of the pitches you want to be making contact with, then that could be the cause of your lower hard hit rate. I'm doing a big piece about plate discipline right now that should come out this week. And I just talked to Juan Soto about it. And he was just like, dude, if you hit the ball inside the zone, you get way better outcomes. And I mean, he didn't say dude, and he didn't say it this way.
That's how we all wish that the conversation you had with Juan Soto was him talking like you to you. That's not how that went down.
Well, he was awesome, actually. Like he was perfect for the piece. It was worth all the work just to get 3 minutes with him. But he basically said, if you just see the difference between production on pitches inside the zone, outside the zone, he said he's not like Brandon Nimmo, where he was trained to be an OBP god. Brandon Nimmo, his dad is like throwing him colored balls and telling him to shout out what the color on the ball was and what the number on the ball, Barry Bonds type stuff, where that's why he has great plate discipline. Juan Soto, you may be surprised to hear, just decided to be Juan Soto. Like he said he was a free swinger, and then in high A he was like, oh wait, that's what the production is on pitches inside the zone versus outside the zone. Okay, I'm not going to swing at pitches outside the zone. Bam, done. Just okay.
It's just that easy. I could just decide that I'm going to be Morgan Freeman, and I'm just going to narrate everything from now on for the next 50 years. That's what I'm going to do, and I just decided one day that's what I was going to be.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why you see the higher swing strike rate for Marcus Semien. I think that's probably the cause of his lower barrel rate, because if you look at the max exit velocity, which has never been really good for Semien, it's right in line with where he's always been. Right on the line of, I would say that he has, 45, 50 raw power, maybe just 50. It's not, I know he hit 45 homers last year, but you can do that with 50 raw power, especially on a peak season. And if max exit velocity is a good measure of raw power, then that would be around 50 raw power. You're seeing the hard hit rate down, you're seeing the barrel rate down. He's a compiler though, and maybe selling Lowe makes sense, but I don't see the dropping makes sense because I think he'll play all season. He'll have a better streak at some point where he settles down and isn't reaching as much and chasing as much. And I still think that like something like 2018 is possible, where he hits for the season 260 with 15 to 20 homers and 10 to 15 stolen bases. I know it's not what you paid for in terms of in the draft, and it's not maybe what the Rangers were hoping for, but
No.
still a pretty good player.
The projections for the rest of the season are pretty consistent across the board when you look at all the stuff over at Fangraphs. I think the Bat X is where I keep going for in-season, rest of season numbers.
Yeah,
247, 319, 427 is a slash line. I'd still probably be on the over side of those numbers rest of the way. But even if that's what he is with 20 homers, 10 steals, plenty of runs and RBIs, okay. Like you're disappointed if you took him in the third or fourth round, and that's what he did. But if he bounces back to that, it's also that's not the reason why you fell short in the league this year. Like there's enough to believe it's going to still come back around. I mean, he's swinging more at everything, and I think that will correct in the months ahead. I'd be very surprised if we talk about Semien again in July and all of these underlying swing metrics look identical to how they've looked so far.
Yeah, and it's funny, 180 power, 180 ISO right there from the Bat X would be like 45, 50 power in a regular season, like in past seasons. Do you know what the ISO is right now across the league?
League's ISO?
Yeah.
It's like 130.
Yeah, nice. Good call. 138. So
it's because I've looked at that page with the average OBP and the slug so many times. It's just it's committed to memory at this point.
2019, the average league ISO is 183, and that's including pitchers. Let me do non-pitchers.
Wow. Yeah.
Non-pitchers, it was 187 that year. So like part of me is trained to look at a 180 ISO and say, okay, that's league average power, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it is worth discussing the humidor, the ball, the fact that 138, like the April. Let's look at the April numbers for 2021 for ISO. We had a 161, so it's definitely down. And I will say that I know that these people that are modeling these projection systems, they're all talking to each other, and they're all trying to figure out how much to change the run environment right now. And it's not entirely clear. So my point is that if Semien doesn't hit 20 homers, then it's mostly because the whole league is not going to their expectations. Like, for example, you cannot use xwOBA right now for a single player because, first of all, it's not that amazing, but it does have some predictive power for batters. But right now, they have to wait to a certain point in order to adjust it. They always adjust the xwOBA for the season that they're in once they think they know enough about the run environment, and they haven't done that yet because it's such a crazy year and we don't know what the run environment's going to look like. They don't want to adjust it so that basically 130 is league average ISO, and then the humidors kick in and start drying the balls out, and August is a crazy month for power. So everyone's sort of trying to figure this out. I'm not saying that ball and humidor is why Semien has no power. I'm just saying that, like, if he hits 15 more homers the rest of the season, it might not be because of a failure on his part. It may just be a combination of ball and bad season for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge drop, though, compared to where he was. I realize
5 last year.
We had the max volume problem with Marcus Semien again, and that's a good problem to have.
724 plate appearances last year.
I mean, the last 3 full seasons we've had, he's only failed to play in 3 total games. So you've gone over 700 plate appearances in each of the last 3 full seasons. Even if you're adjusting down for that, you'd say, okay, maybe it's a low 30s home run total with normal injury risk baked in. Well, you change the ball, you add a couple of things early on in the season that make him different. It starts to compound pretty fast. So it sounds like you're mostly on that projection that I threw out there with maybe a little less power. I think the 20 home runs is something you're pretty skeptical of at this point for a rest of season power number for him?
I mean, we're looking at, let's see here, 70 balls in play for him because he puts balls in play. So this 4% barrel rate that he's got right now, you know, it's more signal than noise. And he's had 4% barrel rates in the past. That's why I point out he had this exact same barrel rate in 2018 when he hit 15 homers. And that was before the rabbit ball. So, you know, 2019 rabbit ball, 33 homers. 2021, you know, not the rabbit ball, but also Dunedin and Buffalo. So he had some park assistance last year that he does not have now.
I mean, it'd be weird if he was the perfect storm of the unusual circumstances of Toronto's 2021 and the 2019 rabbit ball spiking up that home run total to 33. He hit 27 way back in 2016, though. Marcus Semien has always been a bit of a challenging player to completely solve. You know,
look how up and down he's been. I mean, he always will get you about 10 steals in a full season, but you know, he's been pretty up and down offensively. I mean, I still think that it's not a bad signing for Texas, because if you like, it's funny how up and down he's been for fantasy, because he's basically been league average offensively, except for the 2 big seasons every year. So if you get a guy, you're like, hey, he works really hard. He's got good defense. He's gonna be, worst case scenario, league average bat. Then you feel like you've acquired someone who has a high floor, and you've obviously seen high ceilings from him, and you like his durability. So if he's only like a 2 to 3 win player for the next 3 to 4 years, I mean, that wouldn't be good for the contract, but the Rangers might take it.
It's not ideal, but it doesn't hurt you as much as you might think, right? The big numbers on the contract make you think a little differently about what you should get in return. But what you need to get in return is about what you described when you're talking about what Semien's contract looks like. Let's get to Whit Merrifield for a moment. I've looked at his profile, and I think the only thing wrong with Whit Merrifield is that he's on a few of my rosters, and that's why he's underperforming. There's really nothing in the underlying numbers that scares me, though. He's still keeping the K rate under 15%, walking about the same as usual, actually making hard contact at a good clip, more than he has at any point during his career. I think this, to me, is just a slow start for a guy that will be fine as soon as he has a little better luck on balls in play.
Yeah, I guess I'm not too worried. I mean, the league, the swing strike rate being the worst of his career is not great, but the strikeout rate that's associated with it is right in line with his career numbers. So maybe it's not that big a deal. I don't think he's a very good hitter.
Yeah, I've never liked the profile as a hitter, but I think he's still going to play a ton, still going to run. So
I don't know. Is it 3 attempts? Let me see here.
He's 3 for 3 through 20 games. You can't steal bases when you're not on base. He's got a 213 OBP so far.
That's right. But if it's only 3 for 3 in the first month, then what if he only steals you 22 bags this year? So now you're talking about a guy who might end the season 260, 22 bags, 5 homers. That's like
on me.
That's what people want out of Nicky Lopez.
Come on now.
What?
No, that's fair.
Okay. It's not nice. I'm sorry, but I have 0 shares. I did not want to pay. I've said on this cast, if I do have a bias sometimes, it's towards like what major league teams are looking for, and like what is a good hitter for a major league team, because I do think that baseball teams trend towards making those same decisions and making the right decisions that way, right? Like, we don't have a lot of old school teams. The Royals are like the closest to an old school team that would value Whit Merrifield highly, give him an extension, and I'm sure that most other teams around the league would have treated it differently. Would have probably traded him away at this point.
Yeah, well, they got him on such a team-friendly deal. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt them at all, even if they were to somehow reduce his playing time. But I've seen it before, looking back at some of his month-by-month splits. He played 31 games last year, and they obviously lumped September and October together on Fangraphs, so it's a little extra. But 2 for 3 as a base stealer that month. Last July, 5 for 5 in 24 games. I mean, sometimes
Oh,
these
does he
things
just
just
have big
fluctuate.
months?
Yeah, he hit some 7s, 8s, had an 11
That's
steals last August.
interesting.
So
Maybe it has to do with who he's facing,
yeah,
because supposedly stolen base attempts are kind of become meaningful early.
yeah. I guess I'm not looking at anything with that organization from that perspective and believing they've changed. And I don't think you would change with a player like Whit Merrifield anyway. Like if they were really changing, he would be traded because they said, well, we're not going to do this anymore. So let's trade him away to a team that actually wants to let him be himself. So not worried about Whit Merrifield whatsoever. I'm curious about Randy Arozarena, though. I think he's the type of player who, because of his approach, we've talked about his willingness to swing at a lot of pitches outside the zone in the past. I think that makes him very susceptible to highs and lows. It's just the type of player. He is a little bit of a free swinger. Walk rate's down early. K rate's in line with career norms, but a 35.2% O swing percentage would be the highest of his career by a margin about as much as Marcus Semien's O swing percentage is up right now. Tons of ground balls right now for Randy Arozarena as well. His projections point to a 245 average from the bat X the rest of the way, 15 homers, 17 steals. Are you comfortable trying to move for him right now, expecting something like that? The projections also have him striking out less than he has struck out since the start of 2020 the rest of the way. And I'm just not sure where that's coming from.
Yeah. Because he's struck out 28% of the time in every season he's been in the big leagues, and yet everyone's projecting him to strike out less. That is weird, huh?
I think
He's
maybe
27. It's not like it's an aging curve thing.
a little bit of the early 2019, like the debut with
And
the
then the minor
Cardinals
league
took in
stuff.
there, and then minor league track record.
That's weird to me. I think he's going to strike out a lot. There is an interesting piece of thing we haven't talked about, a piece of research and evidence that we haven't talked about in a while, which is volatility. And Bill Petty had this idea of sort of tracking a player's volatility, and you can just look at sort of if you look at those rolling graphs with weighted on base average, OPS, whatever, you can see the kind of the peaks and valleys.
Yeah, the
amplitude, basically, right? And he did some research on that. I asked him to do an aging curve on that, and what was amazing was that players over time are less volatile. Which means that they have lower peaks, and that's what we associate with aging. But also the players that stick around have higher floors, right? But how does that? Then the other finding from volatility was that strikeout rate is associated with, positively correlated with volatility. So having a high strikeout rate leads to volatility, and I think you can understand it in one way, which is just basically this is how we define productivity. And of course they have bad days, because what you're talking about is when he's striking out and not making contact, he's very bad. Right.
Yeah.
And then when he when he does make the hard contact, he's productive for your team. Like, it's almost by definition, strikeout guys are going to be volatile. But he doesn't add the walks, so he doesn't add like a level of, okay, well, at least he's taking his walks right now, at least he has a 310 OBP or something, so he's super volatile. But how do you treat that in a projection system, knowing this guy's volatile? Because maybe this is just his really bad stretch, and then he's gonna have another Randy stretch, right?
I think this is one of these things. I pull up charts like the one it's on screen right now if you're watching us on YouTube, and it's the 15 game rolling WOBA.
Oh, I was just gonna play there. Yeah, there you go.
So it's up on the screen right now, and it's when does this chart scare you? If you're looking at a Arozarena, you see a nice spike kind of in the second half of last year, and you see a few dips that are pretty similar. You see 2 dips from last season, very similar to the dip that he's in right now. So this is in the range of normal, air quotes, I guess you could say. But I don't know. Like I think when I see more valleys than peaks, I start to get a little bit worried. And I think this would be a case where I'm more worried than optimistic. even understanding the type of player, or having what I think is a pretty good understanding of the type of player that Randy Arozarena is.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I put ground ball rate up on that one, on the same graph. And the peaks in his ground ball rate almost exactly map for his troughs, nadirs.
So when he's struggling, it's because he's hitting the ball on the ground, largely.
Yeah. So you see that first sort of the post 2020 hype, the beginning of 2021, that little, downward spike there.
Mm-hmm.
That is the other time that he hit 60% ground ball rates. Then that next nadir, that's really the bottom, where in game 80 of 2021, that's when he was hitting 55% ground balls. And now he's hitting 65% ground balls. He's in another trough. So when I liked him, it was because I thought he had, there you go. Awesome.
Look at
On
that.
the fly. So you see what I'm saying, right? There is my theory is not 1000% correct because of this area here in game 140 where he was hitting some ground balls and was being productive. But my Randy Arozarena theory is that he has basically a swing for power at the top of the zone, and then he has a swing that he can make contact at the bottom of the zone. And if he could toggle that switch at the right times, then he can have like that postseason run, right? Because then he's hitting at the top of the zone for power, and he's doing just enough at the bottom of the zone so they feel like they have to go to the top of the zone, right? But right now, for whatever reason, they don't feel like they have to give him anything at the top of the zone. Maybe he's reaching at pitches outside the top of the zone, right? So they don't have to come into a good spot at the top of the zone, and they're just throwing him fastballs way above the plate and breaking balls super low, and he's not doing enough on either.
His pull rate has spiked as well. He's up over 50% with his pull rate. Normally, he's closer to the low 40%, 42% for his career now as a big league hitter. So
I don't know. Just with the volatility, though, is this weird part where I'm like, yeah, man, he could just get hot. We've seen it. Do you think that it's over? Like the max EV is the best it's ever been. Like the raw power is still there.
I don't think it's
like an
over.
approach problem.
I think what you're seeing right now is a good explanation in why the projections are not buying the average in particular. I think when I think volatile player, I think low average, because or at least a low average potential. And the projection systems are sitting in the mid 240s to low 250s range for Randy Arozarena. That makes sense for me. Yeah, 15 homers the rest of the way. No argument there. He's been running. I think he's the kind of player that as long as he's healthy, he runs. He's 3 for 3 this season, at 20 bags last year. I'm buying the rest of season numbers with more Ks than are projected because I think 28% is the true talent strikeout rate that he's showing. That seems very clear to me. So I just
28.
So I guess maybe you got to dial the average projection down a little from what the projections are spitting out.
Maybe.
Yeah, but I think it's 230, 240 with good power, good speed, and good counting stats. And unless we think there's some kind of path for him to lose playing time, they have plenty of talent. He's not the kind of player that they're so committed to long term because they don't really have players like that where it's impossible. But I think he'd have to play like this for another 30 games before it would actually start to cost him significant playing time.
Yeah, I mean, they need him. It strikes me as it's interesting. I think that all three players that we've talked about so far are buy lows, but not buy lows like, oh, I'm going to buy, the 280 2020 version. I'm going to pay that much for him, right? I think that's out the window. Like with Merrifield, I'm not buying him at 290, 300 and 35 homers. If that's the price, I'm out. But if I can buy at these lower numbers, at the projected numbers for all three of these players, I feel like you're still, especially if you need steals.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is a decent time to go buy any of these three guys because I think they will, all three of them, end up with, I think maybe Semien's only sort of 10 to 12 steals, but, if you want to group them as a group, 12 to 25, 15 to 25 steals you know, as maybe he's an average for the three of them, around 20 steals. That's useful. A lot of people are looking for steals. You know, I would buy these three guys, but I wouldn't want to buy it at preseason prices. Like they would have to come down off of whatever they were expecting out of these people.
Yeah, the draft day equivalent is not what you're going to send back as part of a swap to get any of those players. I would say of the three, the one who's most likely to hit his initial projection is still Merrifield for me.
Yeah.
Of those three.
Yeah, he's just not striking out. And he was never a guy that was about power. So, you know, if you're worried about the power, like, you know, he was projected for 7 homers for some of these guys, you know.
We're on pace. We're on pace for like a 2-hour episode. So
yeah, let's turn it up. Come on.
Ketel Marte, what's going on with him? K rate's way up at 25.5%, walking less than we're accustomed to.
This is the one I might not buy low. Nothing looks good. He's not hitting the ball hard. His hard hit rate is down. His barrel rate is down. His max EV is down 7 miles an hour. Max EV is one of those things where it's not necessarily bad if he hasn't shown it yet, but he's got 63 balls in play and he hasn't hit one over 110. This is the guy that used to regularly do that, you know? So I'm just not seeing it. The K rate is bad. The swing strike rate is bad. The reach rate is worse than it's ever been. Like, I don't think I'm buying him and what part of it is he's not going to give you any steals. So if he's not going to give you steals and you're not sure about the home run, I mean, the average at 26%, I'm not sure about the average anymore. The projections are 270. What if he only hits 260 with 15 homers and 3 steals going forward? I'm not buying that. I think this, I don't know if he's a dropper because he can still play second base, but you know, if somebody wants to buy him, I'm listening.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, a 10-team league player that you really don't want to cut, but I would say he is probably more in that Brian Reynolds group where you look at him and you're like, this is just strange. He shouldn't fall apart this quickly.
And it's a killer.
He's so far away from the core skills that we're used to.
And it's really killer in 15-team leagues where you're like, well, yeah, no, 275, 15-5, that would still play in my league. I should keep him if he's going to do that. And it's the same thing with Reynolds. It's like, okay, I should probably keep him in a 15-team league because, you know, even this reduced level of sort of 270, you know, 20 homers and 3 steals or 4 steals from Reynolds, that's still worthwhile of keeping in a 15-team league. But it also is just so hard because you're not getting that yet. And you still have to like wait for the mediocre numbers. And you're looking at all these other guys out there that are like, you have great numbers, like Eric Hosmer. Man, should I have Eric Hosmer on my team instead of Ketel Marte?
Don't do that to yourself. Just don't. I think Trent Grisham is kind of interesting right now because he, in the shortened season, showed some skills that maybe nobody expected, right? The hard hit rate jumped during the shortened season. Barrel rate doubled over what we've seen throughout the rest of his time in the big leagues. He's underperforming even his normal barrel rate, his 19 and 21 barrel rates right now. So a lot of questions about who he is as a player. Not surprisingly, worst hard hit rate of his career. He's still walking, and the K rate's not way out of bounds, but it is worse than it's been at any point during his time in the big leagues. Still doing well, though, with that O-swing percentage, and still giving us raw speed, sprint speeds in the 92nd percentile. So maybe there's a little bit of when you get on base at 292, you're not going to run as much. So some of the missing steals are there. But I think there are fair questions to ask about Trent Grisham's power since 2020 wasn't a full season and nothing in his barrel rate has looked that good at any point since that season.
Yeah, I don't know if I see superstar potential. I did see superstar potential in him after 2020 just because the barrel rate was great. And even in a small sample season like that, you know, it was really great to see a 200 ISO from a guy who has a great eye and stolen bases. So I did, you know, think that Grisham had superstar potential. But now we have 3 seasons of a basically average, mediocre-ish barrel rate. So I think that he's, you know, like a 170 ISO, 160 ISO guy. You know, I think that's just who he is. So without him changing his approach and maybe going and getting the ball, maybe he could do a Robbie Grossman-esque second part of his career where he goes and gets the ball out front and becomes more aggressive and then, you know, has a season where he hits 25, 30 homers with this new approach, but he's not really showing that approach right now. And it's one of the weird places where I'd almost want the O swing to go up because I'd want him to be more aggressive and try to hit for power. But as he is right now, I think that he can still be a guy who hits 235, 240, 330 on base percentage, and maybe now only about 15 homers. And since he hasn't even attempted a steal, I'm gonna say maybe only 10 steals. But
I think the steals are more likely to come back than the homers.
yeah.
I really do. I think as a lefty hitting in that ballpark too, I think that works against him a little bit. Much easier for a righty to hit home runs in San Diego. So I think that fuels a little bit of the skepticism. Yeah, is he too passive? Is he too willing to work the count and ends up in situations where he just doesn't drive the ball because he's taking pitches he could hit? I don't know if that's the case.
There's this interesting conundrum at the intersection of plate discipline and power, which is just that power exists mostly at the front of the plate. In terms of, I don't know if it's swing mechanics or if it's just how it happens. Maybe it's because that's where you pull fly balls is in front of the plate. But in terms of hitting for power, home runs exist in front of the plate. And so you can actually, despite the fact that plate discipline is positively correlated with everything, power, walk rate, production, swinging less is good for you as a hitter, chasing less is good for you as a hitter. There's this paradox where power still exists out in front of the plate. So the best players find a way to be aggressive selectively, right? And so, to get the ball out in front once they swing. And so the fact that he has such a great eye means that he's still a guy that could turn that switch and figure it out. That's why I mentioned Robbie Grossman, right? Robbie Grossman, this looks like Robbie Grossman before he had the power surge, right? Doesn't he kind of look like Robbie Grossman?
100%. This is almost the same profile. Robbie Grossman stealing more bases early in his career. That's basically what Trent Grisham has been. And if you were taking Robbie Grossman as a top 125, top 150 player earlier in his career, I guess the difference, though, is playing time. Grossman was always stuck on the small side of a platoon. Grisham's, at least as a lefty, on the big side of a platoon. So he catches more playing time. And that's why we keep thinking it can fall into place for him.
I think it's one of those things where, maybe in a different team with a different hitting coach or in a new season, like it doesn't seem likely that he's going to undergo the Robbie Grossman in season, right? Like he's just gonna start being more aggressive this next week,
Right.
So
more of a player to get at a lower price in a future draft season than someone to try and get right now, hoping it's all going to fall back into place. So actually, a
not
probable
a terrible guy if you're
low.
rebuilding or something in Dynasty to maybe try and get,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about Jesse Winker for a moment. How about a 197, 340, 237 line to begin his time in Seattle? Barrel rate way down from what we're accustomed to these last two seasons, at least. Max exit velocity, not too far away, but a tick down from where it has been as well. But the good news, the K rate down at a career low, walk rate up at a career best. So I think most people who have Jesse Winker on their team are looking at those numbers and saying he's coming back to expectations sooner rather than later, isn't he?
I think so. It's a really bad combination for him of the ball changing, the humidor situation, and going from one of the friendliest parks to one of the least friendly parks for offense. So, there's probably a lot of people taking victory laps, talking about how far he fell in their projection systems or in their rankings. Once the trade was announced, but he's not this bad. I still see that raw power in the max exit velo. I think that there's still a certain amount of pressing that this could be reverse pressing. Where he's just like, I'm not going to swing at anything until I feel comfortable. But the bad news is that underlying change in projections because of the park factors and everything still exists. So he still is probably more a 260-20 hitter, 20 homer hitter than maybe some realize.
Let's move on to a couple other names here. Franmil Reyes was one of the players we were asked about. What is happening with Franmil Reyes right now?
This is a little bit in the vein of the Arozarena, like volatile player. Like, isn't he a guy who just goes white hot at times? He has an incomplete approach at the plate and not great bat to ball skills. But when he's going to hit mammoth home runs. And I don't know. I still think he can get to 30 homers this year.
If you saw a chart of his rolling K percentage and it had never been worse before, would that change anything about how you feel about a bounce back?
Yeah, I mean, his swing strike rate's pretty high too. A little bit. It's unfortunate that his defense won't give him a spot in the lineup, even if he's struggling this bad. I mean, how much longer does Cleveland give him before they start? I don't know, playing him only against lefties. That would be awful.
Fair question. Don't think we're quite there yet, but man, I'm looking at the multi-year by game. I just wanted to see how bad this K rate is compared to his previous norm. Oh yeah, he's never reached this level with his K rate before. This is
On the rolling chart,
uncharted territory on the rolling graph for Franmil Reyes's K rate. So yeah, is it possible that he could bring it back down? Sure, anything's possible, but he's also not walking. Something's messed up. Something's very broken with him. In a 10-team league, probably droppable because I think you can find high K percentage power guys. You can find that
230,
profile.
25, 30. Like, yeah, there's got to be somebody we can come up with even that might be out there for you. Maybe Max Muncy, our next guy.
Well, yeah, Muncy got my attention because Max Muncy, based on rest of season WOBA projections, is one of the better hitters in the NL with the Bat X, and I'm trying to make sure that this isn't a case where Muncy's just not healthy because he had that elbow injury, and for me, one thing that would cause him to underperform his previous levels in terms of the quality of the contact he's making is if he's simply not healthy. As it stands right now, he's got his lowest hard hit rate.
Amazing.
Lowest hard hit rate is a Dodger, but the barrel rate's still where it needs to be.
Max exit velo is the lowest it's been.
Max exit velo's down. Walking more. This is the thing I worry about with a player like Muncy.
I'd much rather have him than Reyes, though, dude.
Oh, it's not even close because you're talking about a K rate at 20% instead of one north of 40%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I guess the thing I don't know is, can Max Muncy become fully healthy again on the fly in season, or would he need an IL stint at some point, or will he need more time off?
Or will it just be like he'll be better next year?
Right. Those are the questions. I'm not. So I'm looking at Muncy, and I think there's a good enough chance he's fine because there's more stuff still intact than broken. But I'm also not buying in all the way at I just changed the entire fortune of my team because I got a top 12 hitter in the National League by WOBA. I don't know if he's necessarily going to get all the way back for health reasons.
Wanted to check because I'm actually a little bit below where I want to be in homers and power in a lot of my leagues. And this is relative to other people. So it's not just the whole league being down. Like,
right.
I maybe picked a fair amount of guys that had good power and speed, right? That was my approach, was to like get like these 25 homer, 10 stolen base guys, a lot of those guys, right? Maybe they are hurting more than the guys who have no doubt power. So and also, given that the ball is the way it is, I wanted to test the assertion that, hey, if you want to get rid of Franmil, you can. There are other guys out there. So I have loaded up our 10-team league, the 3-0 show and invitational, which is helpful for us because it's a 10-team league. And I wanted to look at the best options on the wire real quick to give a sense of what we might do. Wisdom.
Patrick Wisdom's like the prototypical strikes out too much, never had the Franmil Reyes level of success, but keeps playing and doing what he's doing despite the problem with the K rate.
And might outdo him in a given season, just because of whatever. He's also striking out a ton, but at least he's hitting for power. Sano on the IL. Kepler is available in our league, and I would pick up Kepler maybe for Franmil. You get a couple more steals instead of homers. Voit, Santander. I still believe in Voit to a certain extent. If he was coming off the IL and Franmil was still striking out 48% of the time, I think I might make the jump to Voit. I think Santander is a good one to pick up. That park is not gonna end up being the number one pitcher park in baseball. I know that there's some park factors out there that suggest that, but I think that's probably an overreaction to the first month. So I don't know. Is Seth Brown, Carlos Santana? Bobby Dahlbeck? Would you rather have Dahlbeck than Franmil?
Dahlbeck could lose time to Tristan Casas. Like the way he has started, he's left the door open for Casas to come up and play. And that does not bode well for Bobby Dahlbeck. I think I still, compared to most of those players, would rather wait and see with Franmil Reyes.
Mm-hmm.
A little longer, which could be to my detriment. I say this a lot. This is what bench spots are for. You don't want him in there right now? Great. You got 5 or 6 bench spots. Use one of your bench spots on Franmil Reyes until he shows signs of life. Maybe look at the calendar and say, hey, he's got 3 matchups against lefties coming up in a particular week. Let's use him then. And then just try to be a little more selective about when he cracks your lineup as a result of what we're seeing right now. I mean, this week he's got 1 lefty, 6 games, 1 lefty. Next week, all righties. So you may have to wait it out a little while.
I found one I might take over Franmil. Who's available in our league? Rowdy.
Yes. Rowdy.
He's not projected for 30 homers. He's only projected for 19. So you would be losing in projected homers. However, the Bat X likes his power going forward more than any other projection system because the barrel rate is great. The max EV is great. Like everything looks pretty good from a StatCast thing. So you'd be betting on someone who has green all over his StatCast and is striking out 19% of the time. Like you'd be betting on someone who's doing the things you're supposed to do in small samples really well.
Yeah.
As opposed to the guy who has a 48% strikeout rate.
I think you could justify that sort of maneuver where available. Last player I want to throw in for this conversation, since this became most of the episode, is Justin Turner.
Yeah,
it happens sometimes. It's there's a lot to dig into with these players, and I think
Turner's 37, and there's something that Jeff Zimmerman found, which is the projected bounce backs for players over 33 years old are less reliable. And I think he was doing that on a season-to-season level, but I think that actually matters probably in season if it matters season to season, right? We haven't had the research done for us, but as much as all the projections say, yeah, he can still hit 270 with 16 to 18 more home runs going forward, and as much as the Bat X sees something about what he's done that it likes to give him a little bit more than that, we have to agree that at 37, those projections are not as reliable anymore.
Yeah, I'm looking at the O swing percentage right now over time. It's hung up at a pretty high level for a while now, kind of going back to the second half of last season. That's a concern. This does look like it could be the beginning of the end for Justin Turner, and I think that means different things to different people, so I should be more clear. I think it means Justin Turner might fall into more of a part-time role. I think it means by July 1st, we're talking about him as a guy that plays 3 or 4 times a week instead of 5 or 6 times a week. Is there someone else that's going to emerge to fully take over that job? I don't think so. Miguel Vargas, if he mashes at AAA, could come up and become more of a threat. But I think as they're currently constructed, Turner's going to have some chances to figure this out.
I'll give him some rope. I mean, Vargas is 22, and yeah, he's killing it again in AAA. Not quite as much as he did the last couple of stops. That just doesn't seem to me how the Dodgers work, right? Oh, thank you, Justin Turner, for your service, and Miguel Vargas is now going to take your job.
Well, I don't know. I mean, max exit velo, lowest it's ever been for Turner so far. Barrel rate 5%, lowest it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
O swing percentage, highest it's ever been.
Yeah, so I mean, none of it's the swing strike rate highest it's ever been, strikeout rate highest it's ever been.
So the bounce back to what the numbers in this case point to a 276, 353, 463 line if you're using the bat X, but a 256, 333, 410 if you're looking at zips. Two pretty extreme projections.
Yeah, and I don't even know why, because the bat, it must be a regression thing, because in terms of like what, how much previous information each system uses or whatever, because the current Statcast numbers for Turner are not good.
No, I'd be more inclined to expect the zips projection the rest of the way, given the age, given these factors all being trending in the wrong direction for Justin Turner. So hopefully that was insightful and helpful in some way. If you have those players, if you're thinking about trading for those players, if you have guys in similar situations, you can kind of diagnose what might be happening and adjust expectations. Consider selling low in some cases. Consider going out and making a move in a few others. I want to talk about the roster shrink fallout here real quick. I think the simple question I have for you is, when you're looking in a deep dynasty league or an AL only league or a league where there's almost no quality players available on the waiver wire, if Willie Calhoun gets his wish and he gets traded out of Texas to a team that has playing time available, Oakland, whatever, are you interested based on what you've seen? We had an email about Calhoun before this move happened that was pointing to some of his underlying numbers and his X stats not being nearly as bad as his actual surface numbers. So do you think we should still be intrigued by Willie Calhoun if playing time opens up for him and he gets a fresh start somewhere else?
I mean, I love the fact that he makes a lot of contact and sometimes it's powerful. I like that the max EV is over 110. So, he's got some raw power. It's just a little bit concerning to me. Like, if he needs an opportunity. Well, who needs good outfielders? Texas Rangers.
Right.
He needs a really good hitting coach to work with him. Well, who has a really, really good hitting coach? Texas Rangers. So I don't know, man. There's something I don't like about this situation, but just the fact that he has a great strikeout rate and has exhibited some power in the past in some of those leagues, it would be enough for me to pick him up. Yeah.
I mean, it's Grisham-y. It's an 18.1% O swing percentage, easily the best of his career. More walks than ever. Low K rate again. He's done that forever. And you look at some of the underlying numbers, the barrel rate is still just not there. Hard hit rate's
It's weird because
but
he's
not
hitting
good.
fly balls, but
Yeah,
he's not hitting the fly balls hard enough to be barrels, or is he popping those up? Like, what is going on there? It's a strange approach. I think I'd be willing to bet that there's something going on mechanically, and that maybe he works with somebody, on his own time, and there's been some conflict between what he hears from the organization and what he hears from his own coach. I mean, this is that. I'm not putting this on Willie Calhoun because of anything he's exhibited. I'm just saying that happens a lot in baseball. Like, that is, if you see someone that's consistently struggling, sometimes it's because they're really, sticking with their guy that they have, their coach, their hitting coach, and not really listening to the organizational one. So maybe there's different voices in Willie Calhoun's head that are pulling him in different directions, and it's not working. But I guess, this is probably not a great moment, and this might be an awakening moment. And maybe the next place he goes, he says, all right, do what you will with me. Tell me what to do mechanically. I got to clean something up, because he has a great eye at the plate. He makes a lot of contact, and that's something I would bet on.
Yeah, and there are plenty of other teams that are giving players opportunities that I don't see as much in as I can see in Willie Calhoun. Best example, Christian Bettencourt getting DH and first base opportunities in Oakland. Doesn't make any sense to me. If they said, we're the team, we want Willie Calhoun, and we're just going to let him play, and we're going to let him hit. Okay, I understand. I understand why you would take that chance. There's still, to me, enough exciting things in that profile. The other big fallout thing, Robinson Cano getting DFA'd doesn't have that much of a fantasy impact, so we'll probably put that more on the 3-0 rundown for Wednesday. But I think Josh Lowe going down, I think it comes back to a question that I've I've kicked around on the Athletic Baseball show a few times, and it's that I don't know what you learn as a hitter when you come up in the big leagues. You spend 20 games at the highest level, and you have issues like Josh Lowe did, 38% K rate. That's a problem. You talk about a guy that had a 78 WRC plus. Many of the players we just talked about, more established guys, had worse stretches to start the season than Josh Lowe did. But he gets optioned down as the roster shrunk after Sunday's games. How do you look at this and say, okay, when is he ready to come back? That's the thing I don't quite understand. I think the concern I would have had about Josh Lowe, and I took him a few places as a late flyer, was that he struck out 26.2% of the time last year at AAA. And AAA pitching last year was as bad as it's been in a long time because of all the injuries at the big league level. We're thinning out the quality of the pitching at the AAA level. Even in that context, you talk about a guy who was 40% better than a league average hitter, showed power, showed patience, and he was amazing stealing bases too, 26 for 26, which isn't going to help you if you don't get on base at the big league level. But I just don't know what the Rays are hoping he can fix going back to Durham.
Yeah, and the eye poured it over. Like, he's not chasing balls at the major league level either. It may not show up in an amazing walk rate, but he showed an excellent eye. He hit a couple balls hard. I think this is more maybe the Rays saying, we are looking at the standings and we need to put our best team on the field in the major league level more than it is about his future and what's necessarily best for his future. Because I do think that it would be best for him to struggle at the major league level. We were talking about this with Matt Brash too. Matt Brash's command is not great. He just had a really bad outing. Now 2 outings in a row where he's walked too many people, can't find the plate. I don't know that for his development, it's going to be better for him to go to the minor leagues, because in the minor leagues, he's not going to get that feedback as much. He can throw it hard towards the middle of the zone, and his natural command won't be any better. And then he'd come back up and not want to throw it to the heart of the zone because there's major league hitters on the plate. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like I would rather that he stuck it out of the major league level and found places in the zone that he can live. And that's basically what he's looking for. And for Lowe, I think that over time, if you gave him, I think it's Lowe, if you give him more time, or is it Brandon Lowe and Josh Lowe?
Right. Yes.
Okay. I think for Lowe, if you just gave him more time, you get some more hard hit balls, and he would settle in. But
I think it came down to a choice between Josh Lowe and Brett Phillips.
Harold Ramirez?
And maybe Ramirez is at least performing in this limited role. I think Brett Phillips seems like one of the most genuinely fun people in the big leagues. I feel mean anytime I suggest that Brett Phillips maybe shouldn't be on the Rays roster.
I know.
But I look at what he's done, and I know it was double-digit homers and steals last year in that kind of part-time role. He had a 38.7% K rate last year. He's close to 40% this year. He's swinging at pitches outside the zone more than ever. Josh Lowe, to me, is just a better player right now than Brett Phillips is. So I think you had to run the risk of possibly losing Phillips. Maybe they didn't want to do that right now with everyone churning their roster. Maybe they're going to do it in a couple of weeks and see if they can sneak him through later.
It's 100% that. It's that Harold Ramirez and Brett Phillips don't have options. So if you would move on from either one of them, you would lose them. You'd have to DFA them.
They know what they're doing. They're smart. They manage their roster really well. So it's just giving themselves more time to get something back that they might be able to get for someone else. Probably it might have as much to do with that as it does.
Or timing, like you said. Like I know that Farhan Zaidi does this out here, where he makes claims at certain times and he ends up DFAing the guy like 3 weeks later. But sometimes it's just that he hopes that he can keep them on his roster because he's gotten out of some finicky part of the rostering season. You know what I mean? There are times when you have to like this moment is a finicky moment for everybody around the league because they had to get it down, the major league roster down to 26. So if you could claim someone now or not release someone like the Rays are, right? Not release someone now, then maybe they could DFA Brett Phillips in, a month and there's not as much roster upheaval around the league, and not as many people would claim him, and they get to keep him in their minor league organization. Maybe that's the thinking.
Yeah, and I just think this goes back to a structural flaw that baseball still needs to figure out, that the best players aren't necessarily on the roster. Like the mechanics of how the rosters work shouldn't lead to a situation where you're actively choosing the lesser of two players because you can have your cake and eat it too by sending one player down and not sending the other player down. Like that doesn't feel right to me. So we'll see Josh Lowe again soon. He might play a lot. I think the problem for us as fantasy players, if you're in a mixed league, you probably can't hold him because it might be a few weeks, and that's a 0. And you need someone else to produce. So it's a drop now and try to pick him up again later if and when that situation opens up the way that we'd like it to. Got one mailbag question that I will squeeze in for this show. We'll roll the other ones over to Thursday, but it's a model versus results question from Frank. Frank's a new listener to the show and a subscriber based on the work we do here. So thank you for subscribing to The Athletic, Frank. theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels, $1 a month if you don't have a subscription right now. He's curious as to our opinion of Joe Ryan on the Twins. He had a great start to the season, but his stuff, location, and pitching plus information look underwhelming. Just Frank wants to know, is he using the data correctly? Is he missing something? Or is Joe Ryan a sell high candidate? So I kick it over to you first. What do you make of Joe Ryan and the gap between results so far in the big leagues and what the model tells us about his ability?
There's 100% something that the model is missing on Joe Ryan, which is his deception. And there's some deception in the model as it stands, because we have things like seam shifted wake in the model, and we have things like release point in the model. So people that throw weird pitches from weird release points are loved by this model. But Joe Ryan does something that we cannot capture because it has to do with the way his limbs come through when he pitches. He leads with his elbow, so that hitters can't see where the ball is, and then the ball pops up. And then on top of that, he does have some things that the model does capture in terms of like his height, his release point, and the way his fastball has ride on it. He does have some good things going for him. But I would say that just ride it, just enjoy it. I think sometimes when there's a huge outlier with the model, there's either something the model doesn't understand yet. Eric Lauer comes to mind. He doesn't show that well in the model. And the traditional metric that you would look for right now, that's useful otherwise, is strikeouts minus walks, and Lauer's killing it there. So I think if someone has a great strikeout minus walk rate and a poor pitching plus, then feel free to ride it and enjoy it. If someone has a poor pitching plus and a poor strikeout minus walk rate, like a Cal Quantrill, I would call them more of a sell high, because those are the two most powerful metrics I have in my toolbox: strikeout minus walk rate and pitching plus. And Cal doesn't do well there.
Yeah, Dakota Hudson is a name that popped for me as someone who's just like dreadful in the model, getting great results. And I know it's actually, so there's a guy like Dakota Hudson, a guy that I watch all the time that seems to be a bit of a mystery
Hauser,
the riddle. Adrian Hauser. Yes. Like there's
power
something
sinker.
About, yeah, they both have sub 20% K rates. They have walk rates above 10%. Hudson gets more ground balls consistently, at least he has this year. But in the past, Adrian Hauser's been basically the same profile guy, and everyone bets against this profile, and it seems to work I'm than expected.
Hey man, I even picked up Dakota Hudson in one league for the 2-star week this week. So I'm not just people. I don't live in my spreadsheets. It's not the only piece of information. I don't just look at pitching plus and that's how I make decisions. Sometimes I do the relievers. It's been very good to me this year with relievers. But with starters, I think there's just more going on, how things fit together. No model is going to nail it completely. I will say that a 53% ground ball rate and 18% strikeout rate and 11% walk rate for Hudson, something something's not working here. Like,
Something has to go. Yeah.
right. Like either he has to stop walking guys or start striking out my guys out, or he's gonna allow more balls in play. Like he's a 180 BABIP. Like
He also doesn't throw hard. Adrian Hauser at least throws kind of hard.
that's right. He's a power sinker. That's not
Hudson's
power.
averaging 92 on his fastball. Like that's so strange to me.
Yeah. And yeah, I would say that I use it as a guide. I use it as a good way to find sleepers, and when it is completely out of whack with what's happening in the results. Sometimes even I pick up Dakota Hudson for a 2-starter. But if he burns me, whoo! You never seen someone get dropped so fast.
Yeah, I've got him a couple places too. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned that I had to do it, but I'm chasing some volume a little bit, hoping to sneak in a couple of wins and maybe like 7 Ks over 2 starts. That's about the best case scenario I think I can hope for from Dakota Hudson. But no, you're not using the model incorrectly, Frank. Joe Ryan is a bit of a unicorn, perhaps, as we're learning here. Curious to see what the next month or so brings. Those teams get more and more looks at him too, because I think the thing about deception is that it might not be as effective over time. It might be one of those things that has an immediate peak, an immediate value, and then the value sort of wanes.
That's what I worry about, because my comp for him is Yusmeiro Petit. Yusmeiro Petit does the same thing where he leads with his elbow. If you can see on YouTube, he's like he leads with his elbow. You can't see the ball, and then it pops up at release. And Yusmeiro Petit had the worst third time through the order penalty I've ever seen. And immediately the teams that did make good advantage of him in his career were like, you will never, ever, ever see a lineup a third time again. And so I look how much value Petit has had. I'm not saying that Ryan is not valuable, but his viability as a starter, especially one that might see a lineup a third time, is gonna. That's what I'm watching over the next few months.
Yep. Well, he's definitely one of the more intriguing pitchers in the pool right now, just based on the gap between what you see and what is actually happening in the results. If you got a question for a future episode, ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com is the best way to reach us. You can find us on Twitter. He's at Enosaris. I am at Derek Van Riper. You can also drop questions under this video on YouTube. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the Rates and Barrels YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. If you have a moment to leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would greatly appreciate that as well. We get to the pitcher side of the What's Wrong with Blank series coming up on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.